I thank the distinguished representative of Vietnam and now give the floor to His Excellency Bruno Rodríguez Parrilla, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cuba, to introduce Draft Resolution A/67/L2.
Señor Presidente,
Mr. President, I would like to reiterate the most heartfelt condolences of the people and government of Cuba to the people of the United States, the city of New York, the people who have been directly affected, and particularly the relatives of the victims for the loss of human lives and the great material damage caused by Hurricane Sandy. We likewise express our condolences to the peoples and governments of the Bahamas, Haiti, Jamaica, the Dominican Republic and Canada with regard to the same events, as well as to Guatemala and Mexico for the recent earthquake that struck those countries. Mr. President, on the 6th of April 1960, Under-Secretary of State Lester D. Mallory wrote the most concise, accurate, and most long-lasting definition of the embargo against Cuba, and I quote, "To cause disenchantment and disaffection based on economic dissatisfaction and hardship, to weaken the economic life of Cuba, denying Cuba money and supplies, to decrease money and real wages, to bring about hunger, desperation, and the overthrow of the government." End of quotation. So far, this has been the vision that has embodied the inhumane, failed and anachronistic policy of 11 successive U.S. governments, under which 76% of Cubans have been born. Our country has never been at war with or carried out any hostile action against the United States. It has never consented to the perpetration of terrorist acts against the American people. In 2008, presidential candidate Obama electrified Americans with his energy, his origin, and his words, "Yes, we can." 3 months later, after having been elected president, he announced a new beginning with Cuba, and I quote, "We can move U.S.-Cuba relations in a new direction and launch a new chapter of engagement that will be sustained throughout my administration." End of quotation. However, the reality of the last 4 years has been characterized by a persistent tightening of the economic, commercial and financial embargo, particularly its extraterritorial dimension, despite the fact that this Assembly has approved by a consistent and overwhelming majority 20 consecutive resolutions that call for an end to this policy. Maintaining this policy in force is not in the national interest of the United States. Quite to the contrary, it harms the interests of its citizens and companies, especially in times of economic crisis and high unemployment, which, according to every poll, are demanding a change of policy. Why encroach on the constitutional and civil rights and the freedom of travel of Americans by preventing them from visiting the island when they can visit any other place on the face of the planet, including those where their country is waging wars? What is the point of rejecting a new market of 11 million people? What is the point of continuing to waste hundreds of millions of dollars of the taxes that are paid by U.S. citizens on the useless and illegal subversion against Cuba? Why harm Cuba's relations with other states, including its allies, with extraterritorial measures that violate international law? What is the point in resorting to an approach that is opposite to the one that encourages its increasing economic relations with states with a different political system? The embargo also harms the legitimate interests of and discriminates against the Cuban immigration that has settled here in this country, which overwhelmingly favors the normalization of relations with our home country. It harms the credibility of the foreign policy of the United States, and it leads to its isolation. It leads the US to adopt costly double standards. After 50 years, it has proven to be ineffective in the pursuance of the goals it envisaged, and it has been an insurmountable obstacle to its ever more uncomfortable relationship with Latin America and the Caribbean. Should the embargo cease, the US government will avoid greater discredit of its humanitarian policies, since it will stop being a constant violator of the human rights of Cubans. The US could refrain from including our country in spurious lists, such as the one that classifies it as a sponsor of terrorism, with the only purpose being to justify the implementation of additional measures against financial transactions, thus causing great damage to the effectiveness and credibility of the international fight against this terrible scourge. There is no legitimate or moral reason to maintain this embargo that is anchored in the Cold War. It is just a weapon in the hands of an ever more exiguous, isolated, violent and arrogant minority that profiteers from the elections, shows contempt towards the call of the majority, and does not resign itself to the unshakable determination of Cubans to decide their own destiny. Mr. President, the use of a less strident and threatening rhetoric and certain partial measures to relax the travel restrictions on residents of Cuban origin and others for academic, scientific or cultural purposes have failed to conceal the tightening of the embargo over the last 4 years. The report of the Secretary General, which includes the contributions of a significant number of delegations and agencies present here, broadly documents the multiple and diverse damages caused not only to my country, but also to many of the governments represented here. In November 2011, the Treasury Department fined the New York branch office of the German bank Commerzbank with a fine of $175,500 for serving as consultant and guarantor of a Cuban national in a payment to be made to a Canadian company. In June 2012, the Department of Justice announced the imposition of a $619 million fine on the Dutch bank ING for alleged violations of the sanctions regime against Cuba and other countries. This was the highest fine ever imposed on a foreign bank. In referring to this unheard-of event, Mr. Adam Subin, Director of the Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, of the Treasury Department, using a menacing tone, said, and I quote, "Our sanctions laws reflect core U.S. national security and foreign policy interests, and OFAC polices them aggressively. Today's historic settlement should serve as a clear warning to anyone who would consider profiting by evading U.S. sanctions." End of quote. During President Obama's administration, the fines imposed have amounted to $2,259,732, a total that is twice as much the amount accounted for the fines imposed under both terms of the George W. Bush administration. The implementation of the blockade has gone beyond all conceivable limits. In December 2011, the Hilton Hotel of Trinidad and Tobago, a property of that country that operates under a management contract with this chain of hotels, received categorical orders from OFAC to prevent the holding of the 6th summit of heads of state and government of CARICOM countries and Cuba on its premises, which became a real scandal and a disrespectful act towards all Caribbean nations and the international community. In July 2012, two executives from the French branch office of the travel agency Carson Wagonlit Travel were fired for selling tourist packages to the island. The company runs the risk of being fined to the tune of $38,000 for every trip that they sold. On the 10th of May 2012, less than 1 year after the first and very limited licenses were granted to allow U.S. citizens to travel, and I quote, with educational purposes and for people-to-people exchanges, end of quote, the Treasury Department prohibited the sightseeing trips to places of recreation, the financial transactions involving tourist activities, and established new and stricter measures to make sure that all itinerary and programs were in tune with the policy against Cuba. At the same time, it was announced that the violation of these restrictions would be punished with fines of $65,000 and the suspension of licenses. Mr. President, the human damage caused by the embargo is huge and impossible to calculate. It causes hardships, shortages, and difficulties that affect every family, every boy and girl, every man and woman, the disabled, senior citizens, to the ill. The Pediatric Cardio Center William Soler has no access to the medicine levosimendan that is used to treat heart problems associated with the cardiac output in small children. The hospital is unable to use this medicine because its supply has been denied since it is manufactured by the Abbott Laboratories. The cardiovascular surgery service of that same hospital treats between 100 and 110 children below the age of 1 every year. More than 90% of these cases require parenteral nutrition before undergoing surgery for a better prognosis. Our nation has no access to the food supplements to be administered parenterally, intravenously then, that are manufactured here in this country, and they are recognized to be among the most effective and of the highest quality. The impossibility of purchasing laminar tissue for tissue expanders and the need for tissue transplants and the need to purchase them in faraway markets at a higher price complicates and prolongs the treatment of boys and girls suffering from severe burns, with the consequent increase in the time of surgery and the hospital stay of these patients. The pacemaker and electrophysiology service of the Cardiology and Cardiovascular Surgery Institute does not have the non-fluoroscopic three-dimensional mapping equipment that is used to analyze the points of arrhythmia in the human heart because of the withdrawal of the U.S. firm St. Jude. This prevents the performance of catheterizations and other treatments to cure complex arrhythmias. Consequently, we are forced to send these patients to third countries so that they can receive treatment. On the evening of the 6th of November, President Obama referred to the cure of the 8-year-old girl, Erin Catherine Potter, who suffers from leukemia and lives in Mentor, Ohio. On the 28th of October 2009, we explained in this room that the Cuban children who also suffer from lymphoblastic leukemia and reject the usual medicines cannot be treated with the medicine Elspar, created to treat patients who develop intolerance because its sale to Cuba by the firm Merck & Company is prohibited. Those children also deserve compassion and relief. On October the 26th, 2011, we also denounced in the same room that our ophthalmological services cannot use the transpupillary thermotherapy to cure cancer of the retina, retinoblastoma, thus making it possible for children to preserve the affected eye. Since that date, 15 children like Liana Aguilera Feria, 1-year-old, Maria Sanchez Rosales, and Rochely Mendoza Rabelo, 2 years old, Erika Rodríguez Villavicencio, Fidel Valdez Marquez, Giovanna Alvarez Torrens, and Magdiel Leva Suarez, 3 years old, have suffered that loss because the U.S. government prevents the purchase of the necessary medical equipment from the U.S. company Iris Medical Instruments. Given its express purpose and direct effects, the embargo against Cuba qualifies as an act of genocide according to Article 2B and C of the Geneva Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide of 1948. It is a massive, flagrant and systematic violation of the human rights of an entire people. We strongly oppose the unilateral coercive measures and the economic sanctions that only cause harm to human beings. As was expressed here at this tribune by the leader of the Cuban Revolution, and I quote, "We want a world free from hegemonies, nuclear weapons, interventions, racism, national or religious hatred, where there is no outrage upon the sovereignty of another country, where there is respect for the independence and free determination of peoples, a world free from universal models that fully disregard the traditions and culture of all the components of humankind, free from cruel blockades that kill men, women, children, youths and senior citizens like silent atomic bombs." End of quotation. Mr. President, as was stated by the Secretary-General's report, the economic damages accumulated over more than 50 years to 2011 amount to $1.6 billion, according to a rigorous and conservative calculation based on the devaluation of the dollar vis-à-vis the price of gold. Any sensible person could figure out the living standards and development levels that we could have achieved if we had had these resources available. The blockade is one of the main causes of the economic problems of our country and the major obstacle to its economic and social development. It violates international law. It is contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter, and it is a violation of the right to peace and security of a sovereign state. It is an act of aggression, a permanent threat against the stability of a country. It is also a gross violation of the rules that govern international trade, freedom of navigation, and the sovereign rights of states because of its extraterritorial character. Since the embargo is a unilateral policy, it should cease unilaterally. Mr. President, the U.S. people, towards which Cuba has feelings of friendship and respect, have just re-elected President Barack Obama. During the electoral campaign, he repeated dozens of times that he continues to be the president for change and that he will continue to move ahead. President Obama has the opportunity to start a new policy towards Cuba, different from the one implemented by his 10 predecessors for more than half a century. It will surely be a difficult task, and maybe he would face serious obstacles, but the President of the United States still has the constitutional powers that would enable him to listen to public opinion and generate the necessary dynamics by means of executive decisions, even without the approval of Congress. There is no doubt that this would be a historical legacy. He would make a serious miscalculation and will make things all the more difficult in the future if he decides to wait for a new generation of Cuban leaders or for the impossible collapse of our economy. This option will make him go down in history as the 11th president that makes the same mistake. I reiterate on behalf of President Raúl Castro Ruz the firm willingness on the part of the Cuban government to move towards the normalization of relations with the United States through a respectful dialogue without preconditions, on the basis of reciprocity and sovereign equality, without undermining in any way our independence and sovereignty. Today, I am again submitting to the U.S. government a draft agenda for a bilateral dialogue aimed at moving towards the normalization of relations, which includes as fundamental topics the lifting of the economic, commercial and financial embargo, Cuba's exclusion from the arbitrary and illegal list of terrorism-sponsoring countries, the abrogation of the Cuban Adjustment Act and the wet-foot, dry-foot policy, the compensation for economic and human damages, the return of the territory occupied by the Guantanamo naval base, an end to the radio and TV aggressions, and the ceasing of the financing of internal subversion. An essential element on this agenda is the release of the 5 Cuban anti-terrorists who remain cruelly and unjustly imprisoned in this country. An act of justice, or at least a humanitarian solution, will arouse the gratitude of my people and a response from our government. I likewise offer the U.S. government now the possibility of negotiating several cooperation agreements in areas of the greatest mutual interest, such as the fight against drug trafficking, terrorism, human smuggling, and for the full normalization of migratory relations, as well as for the prevention and mitigation of natural disasters and the protection of the environment and our common oceans. We also propose to resume the talks that were unilaterally suspended by our counterpart about migration issues and for the resumption of postal services. Excellencies,
señores delegados,
delegates,
en todo caso, nuestro pueblo
whatever the
defenderá a
circumstances,
cualquier precio sus
our people
conquistas,
shall defend, no matter what the cost, its achievements. It will uphold its ideals. It will recover from the natural disasters, such as the one that lashed Santiago de Cuba and the eastern and central provinces a few days ago, and will resolutely continue to update and develop our socialism with all and for the well-being of all. On behalf of this heroic people, its children, its women, and its elderly, I ask all governments committed to the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter and in international law, the norms of the multilateral trading system, freedom of trade and navigation, and the refusal to the extraterritorial implementation of a national law, to vote once again in favor of the draft resolution contained in document A/67/L2 entitled Necessity of Ending the Economic, Commercial and Financial Embargo Imposed by the United States of America against Cuba. Thank you very much.
I thank the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cuba. We have heard the last speaker in the debate on this item.